Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another dimension. Self.
Submitted for your
Shadow.
approval.
Another Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Hello, hello, hello. You're listening to a podcast not only of sound, but also of mind. It's Time to Rewind is a podcast that takes a journey into a wondrous land of time loops whose boundaries are that of imagination. I'm your host, Bubbawheat, and each episode my guest and I explore these time loops one loop at a time. This stop is Trapped in the Twilight Zone, and this is the 8th stop at 2020's Season 2, Episode 9, Try, starting at 26 minutes and 33 seconds with a morning montage, and ending at 26 minutes and 41 seconds with Mark asking if the mask's name is John Thompson. Here with me once again is Niall McGowan from Batminute. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm fine. It's just every time you start the intro, I keep thinking you're going to go into song. I think you're going to do like a hello, 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 my baby, hello, my...
I know, I figure...
Is there a musical, is there a time loop musical? That feels like a thing someone should have done at some point where it's like the same song keeps popping up every couple of minutes or something.
Well, I mean, they did turn Groundhog Day into a Broadway musical.
Oh, okay. Did they do that where it was like, oh yeah, every 15 minutes, I Got You, Babe, once again plays. And it's the same exact dance. And the audience is just walking out in droves.
I wouldn't know because I didn't quite go that far into research to seek out footage of the Groundhog Day musical. I just know that it exists.
It's hard to imagine someone doing, unless they were just like their version of Phil Connors was completely different, but like Bill Murray with the deadpan delivery and musical don't seem like they would blend. He could surprise you, I guess. Anyway, he was in Little Shop of Horrors, so.
Yeah, maybe they go with more of the Greek chorus.
Yeah. But, no.
All right, so...
I was waiting for the Try musical, whatever that.
So let's go ahead and jump into this loop, because, this is a pretty short loop. It's really, we just get him saying, this guy's name is John Thompson.
Yeah.
Make sure I get the name right. And one thing that I noticed in the previous montage is that he dresses slightly differently in each loop. And so here it's mostly the same because he's wearing his frameless glasses and he's wearing his flannel and his jackets. So pretty much the same outfit that he's wearing throughout the majority of the time loop here.
Yeah. It is curious that he does make that little effort for himself. Because you think at this point, like when you're, the indication is he's done, a couple hundred goes of this already. You think at that point, like the idea of clothing and outfits would just be like nothing to you. Like you would just stop caring about it. But like it's the same thing every day. Just the same clothes. They're going to be clean every time. Doesn't matter,
Yeah, and this is starting one of these shorter sections of the montage, and they just get shorter from here on out. This one we start with I call it the morning montage, and I talked a little bit about what's in it in the previous montage section, but like what did you think about that little morning montage? Like, do you feel like they're trying to pull any sort of symbolism or just like a mood out of that stuff?
What the little like the shot of the sky and the coffee percolator and all that business.
Yeah.
The one thing that really struck me about it was that I wonder because they use the sound of a tape rewinding.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things like some people joke about now saying that like there's a generation of people who are like saving Word documents and they don't know what that floppy disk symbol means. And we're getting to a point that we're so far into digital technology. You wonder if younger viewers would watch that and be like, "What is that sound?" Like, would they know they'll know the concept of rewinding something because it's like, but you can do it digitally. It doesn't go like every time. That was the one part of that really struck me. It's like,
Yeah,
I wonder if
so
this is like, it seems like it's bordering on completely obsolete in terms of a sound effect now, because when's the last time someone actually had to rewind a tape? Like,
and then
ever.
now they need a shot of somebody pressing Control Z on a keyboard.
Yeah. Just have the sound effect of, and there you go. Oh, I did like it as a thing. It was a bit weird that too, 'cause the opening sign too, because I think it was just like a Pavlovian response of seeing the coffee percolator and then seeing that white and green sign. I thought it was like, is it a Starbucks they're going into? Like, no, that's the museum opening sign. And presumably the coffee is either his back home or hers. So, but yeah, I mean, it did what it was meant to do. It conveyed the information correctly enough to me. But,
Yeah, which we don't see either of them drinking coffee at all.
no. I think too with like, in order to impress someone, this guy, like, the concept of wealth would mean nothing to him. You think he'd be splashing out on everything for her. Buy her coffee, buy her friggin' whatever she wants. Cause like, well, I'm not losing the money. Although I suppose he does try that whole thing of like, I will give you $1,000, on the bets and stuff. So yeah, cause it doesn't matter to him. The concept of money is just completely obsolete now.
Yeah, that's like the same move that Bill Murray pulls on the piano teacher.
Yeah. Although, this gets in though, because now he begins this joke, and I wonder if he's had to do this. I think the implication is that he would have had to do this for every single joke that he's told. Like, there must be so unsynced, they're just not suited to each other that he's like, yeah, like nearly everything I've ever said to you, I've had to try several times, and now I'm just this is an example of one of them where this, it's not even a good joke. Like, it's just a pretty like, you should just accept the loss. Like, why does it have to land for you? Like the indigenous mask has a really bland name. That's the joke. And then if it doesn't work, then just leave it, man. Because there are other jokes, there's other lines you can pull. But he's like, no, every single one of them has to bowl her over, at least get a titter out of her, so I can feel like I'm on the winning track.
This has to be, a perfect date, so that way
Yeah.
I can make her fall in love with me over the course of like 8 to 16 hours.
Yeah. Although that's the because the more you look at it, the more you start to think like, well, why particularly this joke? Like, why are they emphasizing this one? And I don't know, I was just wondering things of like, because he never considers why she's not laughing at the joke. He never questions like, maybe it's not her humor. Maybe I should try a different approach. It's all like, I'm going to try the same joke, slight variations of it, in order to get her to kind of fall into my sense of humor rather than me altering. Like, he could come in and try like, didn't like the bland name attached to the thing. What if this guy's name is like Cornelius von Scuttlebutt? Try an actual funny name. And like, she liked that one. That's her sense of humor. It seems more he's like, no, I enjoy glib, dry witticisms, and I'm going to see if I can keep this going long enough until eventually she finds one that she'll slightly laugh at to suit my sense of humor.
There's not a whole lot to go on in this loop, but I was able to do, my 2 minutes of Google research. So I looked up if there was anybody famous named John Thompson. And so there's John Robert Thompson Jr., and that's Thompson with a P. He was an American college basketball coach for the Georgetown Hoyas men's team, and he became the first African-American head coach to win a major collegiate college championship in basketball when he led the Hoyas to the NCAA Division I National Championship in 1984.
Yeah.
And then,
we should create one of her reactions like, do you mean John Thompson, the guy who... Are you making a joke about him? Like, yes, that was my reference, of course.
And then I also found John Patrick Thompson, without a P, is an English comedian, narrator, and actor, and he was best known for his roles in The Fast Show, Men Behaving Badly, Cold Feet, 24-Hour Party People, The Brothers Grimsby, and Coronation Street.
Yeah, I do know that. Yeah, that he is very, very famous over here. That John Thompson, the infamous Fast Show was his main one. When I was growing up, at least he used to do. It was a sketch show, so they had like a stock set of characters they played every time, and he was always the host of a music show called Jazz Club, and he'd always turn to the camera to say, like, he'd be addressing one camera and then he'd quickly turn to the other one. So he'd go like, hello and welcome to Jazz Club. Then turn to the camera and go, nice. And then straight back to the other camera to continue. And he'd just do it throughout the entire thing. But the little turns he would, the turn phrases he would use every time would just, become more and more weird and erratic as the sketch went on and stuff. But he was also, I was kind of surprised because I was like, oh yeah, John Thompson, he's so famous over here. I was like, did he ever try Hollywood? And weirdly enough, he is in one Hollywood film, and it is The Man Who Knew Too Little, which of course stars Bill Murray. So there you go. That's a weird little bit of a tie-in there. So it's like, maybe he's these time loops, the loops are getting tighter and tighter every time.
Yeah, he's somebody that I've never heard of. Although I actually, for a little while, I started a podcast called Sketched Out on TV. And I think it's funny because this was before I even heard of the Movies by Minutes community, because I did something somewhat similar where each episode I would look at a different sketch comedy TV series, and then we would pick out one sketch from the course of the entire series, and then talk about just that
the
one
entire
sketch. Series,
each episode. That's a lot. That's a lot of work.
So we would just talk about one sketch, and then we'd also, have some discussion over the series as a whole. At least I would pick out, a handful of episodes to watch, because some of them, and then we would take turns. I think we did Kids in the Hall, the Amy Schumer Show, Key and Peele. I did the Muppet Show.
I only found out recently that Kelsey Grammer did a sketch show like 15 years ago, like just after Frasier ended.
Huh.
And it was one of those ones you're like, oh, okay, that's weird. And then looking at it, it's like, oh yeah, it's got like Caitlin Olsen from It's Always Sunny is in it. Like she was just one of the other players in it. And a very famous English comedian called Lee Mack is in it. And it was one of those ones of like, oh yeah, it failed. Like they did one season and it completely bombed. But it's just one of those things of like, how did I never, I'm such a massive fan of Frasier. And like Paul F. Tompkins was in it. And you're just like, how is no one talking about the fact that Kelsey Grammer did a goddamn sketch show? But it's one of these things like, oh, that's been thrown into the black hole of the internet. So it's just like, no one talks about it anymore.
Yeah, I was somebody, like, as a kid, I gravitated towards all those sketch shows, and I watched a ton of those, like, one-season sketch shows that failed. Like, The Edge was one that it had Jennifer Aniston as one of the cast members.
Yeah. It was not one like at the end of every episode they died or something. There was always like a twist. Yeah, I think I remember. I was too young to watch it at the time, but I do remember like the legend of The Edge, because it was like, oh, it's Jennifer. I think there's something like Jennifer Aniston turned down being on Saturday Night Live or something so she could be on The Edge. Like she's so convinced it was going to be a hit and stuff.
And they use like Bill Plimpton's animation for the interstitials too. And that, like, the Ben Stiller show, I have that on DVD, and I watched that whenever it first came out too. I've seen quite a few of those.
Yeah, it's the thing. It's really out of vogue now, though. The sketch show, the concept of a sketch show. It's bound to make a comeback eventually, but we're just living in a time where it's like it just doesn't happen anymore. Like 20 years back in the UK, it was inundated with the things. They were everywhere all the time. But now it's like, man, nobody's making them currently. But, we just have to wait it out. 10 years from now, we'll be probably back in, if we've been plethora of sketch shows coming at you every which way.
Yeah, I think, the most recent ones that I can think of is like, the two of the ones that I mentioned, Key and Peele and Amy Schumer. But I think those have probably been off the air for many years now.
Yeah. Jordan Peele, the busy man these days, doing a lot of other stuff. So.
Going back to the classic Twilight Zone episode, the next one I have, and it was something that we kind of referenced in the last episode is Time Enough at Last.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is one of the ones where I get the title mixed up. It's like there's Time Enough at Last, Somewhere in Time, or like some kind of stopwatch, and there's Nick of Time.
And then there's At Last There Is Now Time. Time There Is At Last. That's another one.
But I think this is one of the most famous Twilight Zone episodes. This is the guy with the super thick glasses that just loves reading, and he works at a bank, and he gets in trouble because all he does is just wants to talk about Dickens and read while he's at work. And he gets in trouble for it, and then like the next day, and he has like one of those comedic overbearing wives that's like, why are you always reading? We need to go out and have a dinner date, and you need to do this now. And she like rips up his one of his books that he was like trying to sneak with him. And then the next day at work, he goes down into the bank vault in order to read, and then loses track of time, and an H-bomb goes off. And then he comes out, and the entire city is just completely destroyed. Nobody's around. All the buildings are leveled. And he like gets to the point where he finds a gun from a sporting goods store and is about to commit suicide until he sees the rubble of the public library. And he's like, oh, books. I'm saved, basically.
Yeah.
I have enough reading for years. And then he like stacks up all these books, planning
like,
to
let's
read
hope there's
them.
enough food that hasn't been completely irradiated, but
Oh yeah, well before that he does find the remains of a grocery store that has a bunch of canned and boxed food, and he's like, I've got enough food to last me for years, but it's the loneliness that's gonna do me in. And then as soon as he like goes to pick up the book to read it, then his glasses fall off his face and completely shatter. And then he has, the line, it's like, it's not fair. It's not fair. Yeah, in general, I think that the ending of this episode is a lot better than the rest of it.
Yeah, it's one of those ones like you can tell that was thought up as like a 2-line pitch for a show, and they're like, you gotta get 45 minutes out of that now. Whereas like you could have told that story in 10 minutes, basically, like as a very short movie. But like, no, you gotta. There has to be an episode. There is enough time now to fill. We got another goddamn hour of this thing to fill.
Yeah, I think that the actor that plays him, which he's not familiar. I'm not familiar with him, and
that was. We talked about that episode on Batminute, because that's Burgess Meredith. That's That's the guy, of course, Mickey from Rocky, etc. But of course, the Penguin from the 1960s Batman TV show. And yeah, it's weird that a lot of things, like when you're going through things minute by minute and you go researching into like individual shots and stuff, I'm pretty certain, because it's been a long time since we talked about the ending of Batman 89, but I'm pretty sure it's that episode where there's a very like kind of beautifully done shot. I think it's him going into the library, where it's like it's filmed from up above at a kind of slight angle, and it's this big, shaft of light, and it's him standing very like smally with this big looming shadow ahead of him and stuff as he walks in. And Tim Burton flat out swipes that for the end of 89, where Joker's taking Vicky Vale up the steps of the cathedral, and Batman opens these two big doors and walks in. And it's pretty much an identical shot where Burton's been like, yep, that's what, he grew up in the Twilight Zone. He's like, I always remembered that shot. That's where that shot is from. So, and of course it was just weird enough that like, oh, it was a movie with the Joker. But then the person who was originally the figure of that shot was in fact, to most people's minds, even though it's been like 60 years, people still remember the Burgess Meredith Penguin as kind of almost like the default version of the character. He's so iconic at it. I do like the idea of like that would be the Adam West Batman show is actually 10 years after that Twilight Zone episode, where he just managed to craft a monocle out of his old glasses. And then he eventually found another town where people weren't killed by the bomb, but it's like the radiation is driving everyone just friggin' crazy. So you got like a guy who seems to just live as a clown for some reason, and some asshole who's obsessed with riddles, and it's like everyone's just walking around, like Batman's walking around broad daylight as if that's a normal thing to do and stuff. And he's just like, yeah, that was like the Batman TV show was actually a sequel to the Burgess Meredith Twilight Zone.
Yeah, the other thing that I didn't as much care for with that episode is, you know, I feel like a lot of times in the Twilight Zone, it's like you want the bad things to happen to bad people, but you never really get the impression that his character is a bad person. He's just somebody that loves books, and it's like this scene, it's almost like a lot more tragic in that way, to where this bad thing happens to a character that you're almost rooting for.
Yeah, you almost kind of wonder like what the message of it was, though. It's like it's a guy like he's clearly not. He's not happy with his marriage. He's not happy with like, you know, all he wants to do is sort of a bit of privacy and time to read to himself. And you're like, well, everyone is entitled to that. If he's not happy, you should go off and try to get that sorted. Whereas at the end of it, it said like, well, the implication was that like, no, he should have been concentrated on his work and going out and meeting people and having, you know, making sure that he was out and, you know, doing things he didn't want to do.
Yeah, so that way he could have died with the rest of them.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, is that the message? Okay, that's a weird one, but I think nowadays it would have been shifted around to be like, no, just let the guy, if he wants to read, give him time to friggin' read. Like, maybe find people with similar interests that he can talk about the damn books to, at least. But
yeah, give him, you know, 2 years of quarantine where he has to stay at home and away from everybody, so he has time to read. All right, but I think that does it for this episode. Why don't you go ahead and remind everybody where they can find you online?
Well, yeah, you can find me and the show I host, Batminute, just everywhere online. You got on Twitter just as under Batminute, under Instagram as the Batminute. Yeah, we're everywhere. You'll find the show under all your good podcatchers. And of course, Apple Podcasts is on there as well. And yeah, just hop on over anytime.
All right, and as always, I'm Bubbawheat, and you can find me at flightstights.movienights.com. You can find me on Twitter at Bubbawheat, and you can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else where you listen to podcasts. I also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, where you can join and have all sorts of discussions about time loops in general. And until next time, I will still be right here, trapped in the Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval. Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension.
Submitted for your approval.
Another dimension. Light,
for your
shadow, another dimension. Light, shadow, another dimension. Light, shadow, another Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
Submitted for your approval.
The Twilight Zone.
What do you think this guy's name is? John Thompson?